Hey, everybody. I'm going to go through a thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately. Just why are we in the soup that we're in today? And a lot of it has to do with we don't understand what it means to think like an American. And how can I say that? Well, I'm going to show you here. And I've showed you many times before, but as always, I want to take you to the source and just explain to you in common language what it is that our documents tell us. In our Declaration of Independence, at the beginning of it, it says that we are going to, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. If we understood this document, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are now, because these are the things down here. These 27 grievances are what we separated from Great Britain to avoid. And if we look at them, we see that this is exactly what our government is doing to us now. And it has to do with this little thing right here, right there. When in the course of human events, real people have been doing real people things since people were people. And it says here that among the powers of the earth, that we have the right to do this, to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. Okay, when in the course of human events, the laws of nature and nature's God entitled mankind to do certain things. And as I've explained before from Blackstone's commentaries, the legal definition of this phrase is, in the short term, the condensed version, is no human law is valid if it contradicts the Old and New Testaments of the Holy Bible. Any human law that contradicts these must be disobeyed. And it says here that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This pursuit of happiness is supposed to be secured, but it's endowed by our Creator. It's a free gift of the Creator of the heavens and the earth. In the history of the world, there's never been another person exactly like yourself. Even if you are an identical twin, there is not another you, and there never will be. That's one of the miracles of creation, is how mankind can last for so many thousands of years, and yet every person is a unique DNA. So, but we're going to look at some of the courses of human events, because this down here at the bottom, it says, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress of grievances, which is one of our First Amendment rights, in the most humble terms, Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. And it goes on to do some other things, but we therefore, because our petitions for redress have been ignored by a tyrannical ruler, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, declare their independence. What does it mean to take your appeal to the supreme judge of the world? I'm going to do a whole series on this, and I'm going to go through the course of human events, and I'm going to, from time to time, I'm going to go back to this one thing and show you a human event that was done by real people doing real people things, who brought their appeal to the supreme judge of the world. And it might surprise you where this comes from. But it says here at the bottom, it says, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This reliance on the protection of divine providence and appealing to the supreme judge of the world are linked. And it all goes back to endowed by our creator and the creator's laws. So, where in the creator's laws of the Old and New Testaments of the Holy Bible do we find human events where people relied on divine providence before the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of their intentions? And it makes common sense if you just understand how things work with God. Rectitude of our intentions is, we want God to rule in our favor. We want the courts to rule in our favor. We want the government to rule in our favor when we complain about something. But this appealing to the supreme judge of the world, let's get our exact wording correct here, the supreme judge of the world. So the supreme judge would be the final verdict. There's no other place to go. It's the throne of heaven, throne of God. Now, what they called this was trial by the gods. It was very common in the pagan world to be tried by the gods. We went through one just recently, and today we're going to look at Sampson. Now, Sampson was a judge in Israel, and he judged for 20 years. Seemed like everywhere he turned, though, he got the short end of the stick. But he did some great, mighty things. And finally, he just succumbed to human passions and frailty. But when he came for his final appeal before the throne of God, it was a battle between the gods. Whose God is bigger than the other God? So with that in mind, here we go. Then went Sampson to Gaza, the same Gaza that we have today. and saw there an harlot, and went in unto her. And it was told the Gazites, the people of Gaza, saying, Samson is come hither. And they compassed him and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him. So these guys have surrounded Samson, and they're laying in wait to kill him. And Samson lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and went away with them, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of a hill that is before Hebron. When you look at the castles and the stone walls, and they got the big gates with the beam that holds the gates together, and the beams on the side of the gates where the hinges are, they're attached to the stone itself. He just simply picked the whole gate up, bar and all, put it on his shoulders, walked up the hill, and put it on top of the hill. So he was, needless to say, a mighty man. Now this ticked the people off even further. And when it came to pass afterwards that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and said unto her, entice him and see wherein his great strength lies, by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give you, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. Now, it doesn't tell you how many lords of the Philistines there were, but back in those days, 1,100 pieces of silver was a fortune. And Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lies, and wherewith thou might, and I'm going to paraphrase in the dirt road language. And how might you be bound to afflict thee? Samson said unto her, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as another man. A with is a new piece of rope that's still wet. And with it being wet, never dried, this is one of those ones where the rope is made out of intertwining like palm branches or palm leaves together to make a rope. And when it dries, then it shrinks and becomes harder. But when it's green, it has more strength because it just does. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the whips as a thread of tow is broken when it touches the fire. So his strength was not known. Tow is flax plant, where we make linen clothing. And Delilah said unto Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith you might be bound. And he said unto her, if they bind me fast with new ropes that were never occupied, then shall I be weak and be as another man. Delilah therefore took new ropes and bound him wherein, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liers in wait, abiding in the chamber. And he brake them off his arms like thread. Just took these ropes and just, brand new ropes, never been weakened or stretched or tested at all. And he just broke them like they were thread. And Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. And she fastened it with the pin and said unto him. Okay, so we see weaving in the web. The web on a weave is the threads that go up and down. And then you take the other cord and you weave it through the web. And then you have a beam that you lower down to tighten it. And the pin is what holds the thread that you weave it through the web. So she's attaching his hair to the weaver's beam to weave it right into the cloth. So she fastened it with the pin and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awakened out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. He just walked away with the whole loom. He's just making a mockery of these people. But they know that they can't take him because he's already killed 1,000 of them with the jawbone of an ass. And he's just made them look foolish with his feats of strength and cunning for a long, long time. So anytime you expose a politician and you just beat them at their own game, they get more and more vicious about how they can take you out. And so what are they trying to do? They're trying to kill a guy. Does that seem familiar to you? Verse 15, she said unto him, how canst thou say I love thee when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherewith thy great strength lies. And it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death. This is where we get, you're going to be the death of me, woman. You pestered him to death. That's where the phrase comes from. But after she vexed him unto death, just nagged him incessantly to death, he told her all his heart and said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God. My source of power comes from my God, from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be just like any other man. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up here this once, for he has showed me all his heart. What a wicked witch. Anyway, she must have been something for him to cave to her like that. Human frailty. People are people. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and brought money in their hand. This time they brought the money in their hand. And she made him sleep upon her knees. And he called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. Boom, he lost it all. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as other times before and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord had departed from him. Wist, we don't speak that way. He didn't know that God had departed from him. He's going out there ready to get his jawbone and whoop him some ass. That's where they get the term, I'm gonna whoop some ass. It's from Sampson, okay? It's not what you think. I'm using the jawbone of an ass. Oh, it's just certain little things that just go right over our heads. Verse 21, but the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass. And he did grind in the prison house. This put out means dug out. They took his eyes out. They didn't just poke a hole in where he couldn't see. Howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. Now, it doesn't tell us how long he was in prison, but he was there long enough for his hair to grow back. Then the lords of the Philistines gathered together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, for they said, our God has delivered Sampson, our enemy, into our hand. See what I was talking about with trial by ordeal or trial of the gods? Here's the definition, and here it is in plain writing. The first one we did was David and Goliath. Goliath denied or denounced the God of Israel. David went out there and said, I represent the God of Israel, and he took him down. God ruled in his favor. So here we see this is going to be a trial of the gods. The Philistines think they have already won the battle because they have him in chains as a captive. And so they are going to sacrifice this man of God to their god, Dagon. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, and they said, our God hath delivered unto our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. Even the people are rejoicing that their God had delivered them from Sampson. And it came to pass when their hearts were merry that they said, call for Sampson, that he may make us sport. And they called for Sampson out of the prison house, and he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. Just like we go when we watch a football game or we go and watch a boxing match or whatever, they brought him out there for entertainment purposes, so they could laugh at him and they could mock him. That's also part of the definition of sport, is to laugh at and mock. And Sampson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house stands, that I may lean upon them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Sampson made sport. So there's thousands of people here in one Sampson. These over 3,000 people are celebrating the victory of their God for delivering their enemy to them. And Sampson called upon the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me. I pray thee and strengthen me. I pray thee only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes. He's taken his appeal to the supreme judge of the world. His appeal, his final appeal, is, God, give me my strength one more time so that I can avenge myself for the Philistines plucking out my eyes. And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand, and of the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bowed himself with all his might. And the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew all his life. And it talks about his brethren, and they came down and got him and went and buried him, and he had judged Israel for 20 years. So here's another one of those coming before the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions. We want you, here's our case. We're going to bring it to your throne, and we want you to rule in our favor. We see on our great seal at the top, it says, Annuit coeptis. Annuit coeptis is a Latin phrase that means God has ruled in our favor. Isn't that something? So when we go before the supreme judge of the world with our final appeal, because see, we've been redressing our grievances with our government here for a very, very long time, and we've been ignored. Our back's against the wall right now. I mean, we're not quite as bad as Sampson being captured, tortured, and tied to the pillars, but we still got our backs to the wall. Where are we going to turn if our elected officials continue to deny our redress of grievance? Well, the same thing they did back there in the Declaration of Independence. But since we don't know these stories and we don't know these human events, we don't recognize the phrases and what they did. So it took them 7 years or 8 years of fighting to finally sign the peace treaty from 75 to 83. And yet they were going against the mightiest military might the world had ever seen. And like Sampson with the jawbone of the butt of an ass, they won against all odds because they took their final appeal with that firm reliance on divine providence. See here, Sampson, after he had lost it all, was a prisoner, had his eyes gouged out, was tied up to the pillars, was chained to the pillars. He turned to God with a firm reliance and says, just give me the strength one more time and the glory will be yours. So he wiped out all the pagans of the Philistine leaders. So that's where we're at, folks. We need to get back to this type of firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. Take our final appeal to the supreme judge of the world and watch God go to work. Hope you learned something here, guys. There's a lot more of this stuff coming down the pike. See you next time. Go to our website, libertyman.online. That's libertyman.online. You can get autographed books. We're going to put up our whole library there eventually where you can see this stuff and the way they wrote it, the way they said it. And let's take this country back. Amen.